We good? All right. Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 14 Wyndham Raymond School District Board of Directors meeting. Today is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. The time on the dot is 6:30, and we are in Wyndham Town Council chambers. May I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Pete Briggs.
Here.
Jessica Bridges.
Here.
Jenny Butler.
Here.
Marge Cavoni.
Here.
Sorry, I can turn my mic on. Pete Hensler. Here. Shar Jewell.
Here.
Kate Levier.
Here.
Scott McLean.
Here in spirit.
Mike McClellan.
Here.
Al Potter. Here.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll come back.
I'm sorry. You didn't do it.
We're all rolling around here. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
We don't have any adjustments tonight.
Okay. Item number 5, public input, an opportunity for the public to comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? I see no movement. All right, we will move right into superintendent's report.
Sure. So I have a couple of quick things tonight because I know we've got an action-packed agenda. So first of all, received notification this afternoon that the Wyndham Middle School Chess Club, who did a fundraiser for Ukraine, were able to raise $275.21.
Okay.
And that check is going to Heart International for Ukraine refugees. And I have a copy of the check, which was done today. And it looks like they were quite successful in their mission to raise some funds. So pretty exciting when you see kids involved with activities such as that. Also, I wanted to share tonight, I know Kyle was here doing his budget in the Raymond meeting, but our Odyssey of the Mind teams had a chance to participate over this past weekend. We have some exciting results. So first of all, I'll start with our Wyndham Primary School B team, scored 5th in Division 1. Jump a level here. Wyndham Middle School team scored 2nd in Classic Musical Production Division 2. Wyndham High School scored 1st in their division, which is Musical Production Division 3, and they've been invited to Odyssey of the Mind Worlds, which is in Iowa, upcoming. So congratulations to that team. And then Life is a Circus, Division 1 for the elementary level. Wyndham Primary School A came in 3rd, and Wyndham Primary School B came in 5th. So congratulations to our kids who did an outstanding job over the weekend, and congratulations to our high school team who is right now in the process of doing a little bit of fundraising to get to, I can't remember the spot in Iowa, but they're going to. So some pretty exciting things that are going on here towards the end of March.
Cool. Perfect.
Okay?
You all set?
I'm all set.
That's great. Board roundtable. Anyone have anything they wish to share?
Chris just shared it for me.
Sorry.
Took your glory. I see, Shar. Go ahead.
So Phoebe sent me a video, my daughter Phoebe, for those that don't know, sent me a video from the high school this morning of, and I don't know a lot of the background, but I guess a group of students were playing music this morning. Some sort of assembly during Pride Block or whatever. Good, Al, you're nodding your head, so it wasn't something fake that she was trying to like fake me out on or something. But they were great, and I was really impressed with that they were able to get up in front of a big group of people in the auditorium and play really well. So it was nice to see that. And then I'll do my usual speech about people getting involved in their local and state governments. And I have a concern personally that the COVID is not gone forever. I mean, I know it's not gone forever, but the restrictions surrounding COVID are not gone forever. And those in Augusta that control our daily lives when they declare an emergency are still in power, and they can make decisions, whether you agree or disagree. I frankly don't care as long as people become involved. I've always found it frustrating that people sit home on their couch and complain, or in nowadays it's social media, but they don't actually do anything about it. So once again, it seems that every meeting I talk about how people need to get involved and become educated and then take a stand and do something about it rather than just sit on their couch and complain and then bash people on social media, because that does no good for anybody. So that's the end of my spiel for today. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to launch right into item number 8, Gifted and Talented Programming Update, and I'm happy to introduce Christine Hessler, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, too many R's, and Christine Frost-Burtonay, Assistant Superintendent, who will shine a light on GT today.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to sign back in and it's connecting. Thank you for having me. I'm here tonight to give you a quick update on the Gifted and Talented programs. For those people watching at home, this is, we often do program updates. We try to rotate them around to help understand the different things that are going on and where we are in the process with the different programs we have. So Mrs. Burtonay is going to jump in here with me as well as we go through. Just for people to understand the definition of gifted and talented, the Maine Department of Education defines gifted and talented students who excel or demonstrate the potential to excel beyond their peers in terms of general intellectual ability in a specific academic aptitude or artistic ability. And RSU 14 complies with Chapter 104, which is the state ruling in the education of gifted and talented students. So just for people to understand, we adhere to the Chapter 104 rules, and that's what we often look at and touch base with the DOE as we go through here. So some of the things that people often ask are, what are the traits of giftedness? And there are many characteristics of this, and we have a process that we go through. So we also, there's a big range of academic as well as social and emotional characteristics, and every student is different. However, we provide on our webpage, so that we can all kind of see, just so there is a nice list of characteristics of giftedness, and I know that's really, really small, so I apologize for that. And these start at birth. Sometimes this isn't something that you can study for and all of a sudden become gifted, but there are some things here that you can take a peek at. A child may be highly sensitive. They have an excellent memory. Usually they have a large vocabulary. And so this kind of gives parents in our community an opportunity to see some of these traits when they're considering whether or not their child is a candidate for the gifted program. So in RSU 14, here's just a snapshot of our services. We have 4 certified gifted and talented teachers in the RSU. We have 1 at Wyndham Primary School, and that teacher does enrichment for K through 3. We do not identify children in the gifted program until they leave grade 3 spring of this time this year. We have 1 teacher at Manchester. That is a pull-out program that teaches math and ELA for 4th and 5th graders. We have a teacher at Wyndham Middle School, and she teaches an ELA program for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And then we have a teacher at Raymond Elementary and Jordan Small Middle School. Lori Bond has joined us. Poor Lori joined us when COVID hit after the retirement of Mr. Newcomb, who was here for many, many years. And she does gifted and talented for ELA and mathematics in both Raymond schools. And so just for community to understand, we do have some steps for initial identification, and that starts in January of 3rd grade. We notify all parents that we do have this program, and it accompanies a frequently asked question sheet. So from there, students can be referred for testing, either a teacher recommendation or a parent recommendation. And after February break, we take those students and they are tested using the COGAT, which is the Cognitive Abilities Test. So round 1 is the COGAT, and it is broken up into 3 subtests, which is verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal scores. And then some students move on to round 2, which includes not only the COGAT, but they also take the TOMAG, which is a test of mathematical abilities for gifted students, and a writing prompt. So once we gather all of that data, a committee gets together in April, and the following are reviewed for trends. And this is done blind, so there are no student names on the list. So if you can imagine a spreadsheet with data points, we look at iReady scores for reading and math for both fall and winter of third grade. We look at the fall NWA scores that the state does if the student took the test in the fall. We look at the 3 subtests of the COGAT, the TOMAG and the writing prompt, and teacher and recommendation score. So when parents fill out a recommendation, there is a scoring component that goes with it, along with their teacher one. So we look at all of those blind, and then from there, we determine about, a group of students that would benefit from that kind of instruction. And so what the committee is looking for are consistent scores in accordance with Chapter 104. So Christine, I'm going to turn it to you now since I've talked and you haven't yet. So.
That was helpful. So like with any program, periodically you want to check in. And so Christine and I will be bringing the teachers together, the 4 she mentioned from across the district, who have a lot of experience in GT service delivery. And we will be doing a deep dive on all things GT related, looking at the website resources, the clarity for parents, around qualifications and a lot of what Christine presented here, Chapter 104 guidelines, make sure the process is really clear to them. We'll be looking at perhaps adding additional resources for parents online. Christine and I will be developing some professional development resources to support principals in schools so that regular education teachers understand the criteria to qualify for GT. We will be, what else? We are going to be working on a questionnaire for parents, really just examining everything that we do from training and PD, not only elevating awareness for staff, but also for the community and parents. And thinking about our practices, is there any area where we can be more transparent or think about how we deliver service? Is there anything that we can do to enhance that program offering? So that's our next step.
And then one other piece is to look at the new state standards that have been adopted and how does that impact gifted and talented services and some of those standards that may need to be put in those places. So that is our short update on gifted and talented. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and next time you see us on this topic, we may have some new information for you to share or some new updates.
And just that we'd love to come back at some point after we've done that deep dive with the GT staff to come back and present some updates.
Yeah.
So.
I have a couple of questions, if
Sure.
you don't mind. If you could go back to K to 3, where you don't really specifically identify.
Yep.
And what is that called? Enrichment.
Enrichment, yep.
So how are those students identified?
So teachers may notice that there are some students in their classroom who are further ahead or really need a challenge, and our teacher, Linda Berry, does different groups, and so kids go in and out for cycles, whether literacy or mathematics, to get a little bit of an extra boost and some higher order thinking skills when they do that piece. And so Linda works throughout the building, consulting with PLCs when they meet together, or with teachers when they see a need of a child that could use some extra area and some work in that piece.
So it's not pull-out, it's additional.
No, they do pull out.
They pull out?
Yep,
Okay.
they do. They'll go out and could be a couple of weeks, and then they come back in another 3 weeks. So they kind of do it in pockets for those teachers, and it's in consultation with their classroom teacher.
And is there, and then I'll get to the rest of the board, but I'm so intrigued. Is there a cap for how many students can a teacher in Manchester accommodate? I mean, do we ever turn a student away because we can only accommodate so many?
I don't think we've ever turned any away. We're really looking for those kids that score usually in the high 90s across the board. Usually the state of Maine recommends that this could be about 3 to 5% of the population of that grade level.
Okay.
So that's not, if you have a year where there are more children, then we need to program for more children. If we have, all of a sudden we have 25 kids who are scoring in the 98th percentile all across the board, we need to get some more. We need to program it just for them. But typically when you look at a class level, you're looking traditionally 3 to 5%, 6% maybe, but usually we have not seen any higher numbers than that so far.
Okay, Marge?
Yeah, because I remember well, a few years ago, quite a few years ago. It was basically the kids that fell in the top 5%. So has that changed? Has that
It's
sounds like it's varying a little?
It varies. It's not, there's nothing in Chapter 104 that says you must identify this percent of children, but typically when you look at what they're looking for those services, that they can't be met in the regular ed classroom for those subjects, you're looking at that usually top 5% of kids, so.
All right, thanks. So once a student's identified and you're doing this in third grade or whatever, how often is it reevaluated? Like if you don't get in that third grade year,
Yep, you can get in, after at the end of each spring, teachers have brought forward students in fourth grade that says, this child, look at this data, can we relook if placement is possible? You also can retest when you change grade schools. So someone may not have gotten in at the end of third grade, but they get in at the end of fifth grade and they're going into the middle school program. Once you hit high school, you're looking at honors and AP courses, so it's really that middle chunk that we're identifying for. So, but again, a parent at any time can bring forward and ask to have your child's data reviewed. There is a process you can go through and have those scores and everything looked at, so.
and to the question about capacity, so you don't have to wait for somebody to fall out of the program or
No,
something?
no, and we've had students move in that were identified in other programs, so we, just like any other students, they move in and they might have been identified using the same Chapter 104 recommendations, but no, there isn't that piece where somebody has to, leave to go in, so.
All right, that's good for people to know.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
For anybody who happens to be looking and doesn't see a math teacher listed at Wyndham Middle School, it's a program for advanced students that's within the math department itself.
Yes, so there's an advanced placement math class, 6, 7, 8, that's how we track those pieces, so. And again, then when you hit high school, as Al knows, you get a full array of courses that you can take at different levels. And it's okay if you are not in the gifted program, you can still take honors and AP, like it's not that piece, so.
Raise my hand for myself. That's very good. Very good, following protocol. If a student is identified by the teacher and a parent signs off, because it requires parent
Yep, this is
Okay.
placement, yeah.
to go into this program. So a parent is authorized, their student to go into the program. At any time, they can remove that student from the program,
Yes.
correct? If they are not pleased or want to go in a different direction. or whatever.
Absolutely, yep. So we meet as a committee, we have that process in place, that if a child is in there and not feeling successful, we can meet as a team and we can make that determination and make sure that's, also want to support that child if they don't want to go out to the ELA teacher or math teacher, yes. So you're not locked in for life either, so.
And typically, it goes for the full year. I mean, if you're,
Yes. Yep.
so it's not like mid-year,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep,
Okay.
but there are cases, as all children have things
Right,
come up
right.
and you accommodate and we do what's best for the child, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the identification process for those tests, do they purely test for just ELA and math skills? Is there any sort of other things they look at, like creative thinking or anything like that?
So if you look at the COGAT, there is the third one. It has a lot to do with spatial representations. And so the test itself isn't something you can study for. It's kind of the way your brain works. And so, Al, you're right. There is a component that is, how do I look at these lines and what does that mean? And that creativity piece comes out. We also are very fortunate in this district that we also offer some extended art pieces as well for the arts. So we have the chamber singers. We have art, art class, our art teachers are amazing. And Patty Gordon and other people extend in the music department. So we can fulfill students who are very high achieving in those areas. We naturally have roots already in our schools built for those. So-
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody have any?
Just one more, and I think I already know the answer, but in case somebody's out in cyberspace and
That's why we
doesn't
do
know.
this.
So if your child is recommended for this higher level program, they don't have to do it across the board. It can be per subject. Is that correct?
It's reading or mathematics, yes.
Okay,
Yep,
but
so
once you
some-
get to high school, it changes though, right? Because like my daughter's been recommended by her teachers for AP Art next year.
Yep.
So,
She could do AP Art, and she could do U.S. History Honors. So that's the beauty in high school is
Yeah.
you can do whatever you would like. It's like a great menu for kids.
Right.
And if kids are being recommended and excelling in art, we have that AP Art option for them.
Yep,
Which
great.
is great.
Thank
So,
you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the update.
Of course.
Next up will be the 2023 budget discussion, and Mr. Hell is getting prepared over there to do something, presentation. Wait a minute.
A little song and
Oh, wait.
Sorry. Sorry, Kate messed it up.
No, she didn't, I missed it.
Sorry.
Oh, you did? Sorry.
Yes, I
Sorry,
missed
didn't
it. I take total blame.
While he's getting prepared, as you all know, we have had cost center presentations for the past couple of weeks, and they've been presented to the board, and we have finished those presentations, and now we kind of take the whole look at what this budget looks like and what it means for the district. So, Mr. Hell.
Sure, so I'm gonna turn this on again. We're just wrestling this thing around tonight. The packet that I just gave all of you is the packet that went to Finance Committee last night, who did have a chance to meet via Zoom and review some elements of the budget and review specifically where we are in this process. And just to remind folks, I'm going to go here, that this is still a process. This budget is not done yet. As Ms. Bricks said, March 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, the board had a chance to sit for budget presentations, and tonight's really the first chance for some board deliberations. The target would be to have the board vote on April 13th, and that is the Wednesday before April break, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's important in a second. But just also to remind everybody, budget isn't, it feels like just as soon as we finish up a budget, we're already starting the next one. And so November to December is when all of our building administrators and their leadership teams were starting to look at priorities, trying to look at what were the needs for this upcoming year. January, February, the administrative team worked through a budget prioritization process where everything that was brought forward from each of the buildings was either given a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. Priority 1 is always enrollments, school safety, anything that is going to be a life safety factor. Those things always go priority 1. Priority 2, priority 3 becomes what are some of those nice things to have that if it's a really good budget year that maybe we can take a look at. For this year, given some of the social emotional needs and supports for classrooms across the board, everything that you're seeing in this budget really fell to that priority 1 because it was a priority to support students. And so, as I know this is the board's going to get into some discussions tonight, we can help kind of give some of the background pieces to that. So the board has a chance to deliberate tonight. They have a chance to deliberate on the 6th, and then on April 13th to vote. The reason why the vote on the 13th is important is that we have some statutory deadlines that we need to meet in order to call a public budget meeting on May 18th. And for those of you who had a chance to attend, that's the traditional meeting in the auditorium. We actually haven't had one because of the state of emergency for the last 2 years. We'll be returning to the format. At that meeting, the public will have a chance to look at all the different articles of the budget and have a chance to vote. And then whatever comes out of that May 18th meeting will then go to the voters on June 14th, which is late this year. Typically, where the voters are voting first week of June, that's late this year, which then also means that any sort of reasonable assurance letters or other things that need to come out of our office will be going out June 15th, which is the last day of school. So we're going to be relying on a lot of electronic communication this year towards the end of the year. I want to go back to, and I've just grabbed some quick slides from my original March presentation. Open the door this year was 4.5% from year over year. And just some things and some challenges that led to the 4.5%, and then also some challenges that we're facing. We have negotiated contracts. We have 3 associations within the district. We have the administrators, the support staff, and the professional staff, the teachers. And yes, everyone's professionals, but sometimes we call them a little bit different names with those groups. But some of the budget challenges is that, and we talked about this in finance last night, Cumberland County is a hot real estate market. And it hasn't just been this year, it's been for the last several years, and valuations in Windham and Raymond have been growing and outpacing the rest of the state. When the state funding formula was done, it was based on perceived community wealth and number of students. And so when your valuations are going up, and this next piece here, we're still working through some COVID enrollments, which are kids that left for homeschooling or other placements and have not yet returned, so our enrollments are down a little bit. We have seen some reductions in our economically disadvantaged students, because if lunch is free and breakfast is free and there's a paperwork piece that I normally would have to do, there's no incentive to do the paperwork because lunch is free. I don't have to do it in order to be able to do that. Inflation of goods for purchase services, being able to buy school supplies, being able to buy materials. A great example is that we had an additional mower that we needed to purchase this year. Halls has 1 commercial mower. That's the last mower that they will have for the rest of this year. They'll be taking orders in the fall for commercial mowers, and they're not going to see anything. So supply chain issues have definitely impacted us and may even impact our ability to get all the school supplies that we're going to need moving forward. In addition, we did see a reduction in special education students this year, and when you do see that reduction, it is a dollar for dollar as far as reimbursements, and so seeing that reduction in those students. So when I presented version 5, and version 6 was created Friday to Monday, version 7 was started today. So this is already old news. We were looking at that time at a $55.5 million budget with a $3.3 million increase, 6.34% increase. From the time that this was presented to the board, some additional things happened. Number 1 is that we had the notification that we would get pre-K expansion or have the opportunity for pre-K expansion. The other thing that we learned about with version 6, because one of our big cost drivers is health insurance, we had budgeted 12% of an increase because there have been years we've hit that. We were informed last week that our highest possible percentage for an increase in health insurance is going to be 8%. For all the pools in the state, and each district is treated in a different band, in a different pool. The districts that have the most expensive claims would be in the highest pool. They're going to get the 8%. We don't know yet where we're going to fall for the other pool percentage. And we're anticipating, or we've been told, we've been guaranteed that we will have that data by April 8th, which is another reason why it's, as far as voting on the budget, April 13th, until we have that data, that we can't do that. The other thing that I think is important for the public to understand, and also for the board to understand, is that we often get grants, and those grants live outside the budget. So if we get a Title I grant, and that money is kept outside the budget, expenses are kept outside the budget, doesn't impact the overall percentage, it doesn't impact the overall revenue. Pre-K is a little different, where that pre-K expense and that pre-K revenue both run through the state funding formula. And so in essence, they do impact your budget because if you have more pre-K students that you're going to be servicing, which is a great thing, it's going to cause your budget to go up. And so it's going to increase your percentage. On the flip side, though, it's a dollar for dollar amount that you get. And I know Christine had shared with the board that we've been working with, I say we, Christine has been working with, I'm not going to take credit, Christine's been working with some of our local providers and looking at ways that we can expand pre-K through some public-private partnerships. And we've received the go-ahead in order to be able to do that. it does impact your budget. And so it's money in, it's money out. In essence, RSU 14 will become the fiscal agent for that. And so if you take pre-K out of the equation, we're at 5.37% increase right now with the budget. This is not a landing point for us. We know that. We know that we are going to need to do some additional work. We also know that we have some additional data that's going to be moving forward. Part of tonight, and this is an opportunity for the board to say, you know, we talked about this particular thing, I want to learn a little bit more, or to ask what would be the impact if somebody brought forward a position, what would it look like if we didn't have that position, because we know we're going to continue to move that dial a little bit. Finance had a chance to talk last night and had a chance to talk about bringing down the percentage. And so we continue to work. We did quite a bit of work today looking at ways that we can bring that down. Just wanted to remind the public and remind the board where the increase is coming from. So number one at Windham High School, and Ryan brought this forward in his presentation, and I think he also did it in one of his updates. Ryan is looking next year to work with the math department and with middle school math teachers to really address what's happened with some of the math gaps that have happened and offering an everyday algebra course. Wherein students, instead of having every other day math, they would be having it every single day with supports. It does require an additional teacher. Raymond Elementary and Jordan Small, we're looking to add some additional .2, which is equivalent of a day, in some social work services. Brandy has a grade 5 that's going to be bigger than any other class that's been going through Jordan Small for a while. Beth, on the other hand, has a position in 4th grade that's going to be reduced this upcoming year. It was a COVID-funded position, so in essence, we were able to reduce costs last year. That grade 5 teacher, though, is going to be necessary. Katahdin, Craig came and talked about a school counselor and funding that school counselor half out of an ed tech reduction, so cutting that position through. Technology, high school computer refresh. And specifically for the board, we'd be refreshing grades 10, 11, and 12 because we will receive quite a bit of subsidy towards 9th grade. And we believe that we can take care of that, so some other budget changes in current budget to take care of that. And again, it'd be difficult if we didn't take advantage of that money. Transportation, 0.15 of a bus driver. Believe it or not, that adds another run, adds some flexibility, and that would be adding some time to an existing driver. And support services, Lisa came and talked about this, but adding some supports for English language learners, where the number of students that we're servicing is becoming greater. There was a reduction of 11 ed techs out of that budget. And in addition, located within the budget are ed tech hours, and our ed techs right now are 32 and a half hours, but bringing them back to a 35-hour week. That reduction, I think, was made in 2009, 2010, somewhere around in there. That was the ARA money cliff. For those of you who lived through the last recession back in 7, 8, 9, when we were impacted by funding. And then district-wide, some additional support in HR and payroll, 0.2 music teacher, and an elementary tech integrator. And then pre-K expansion, those private partnerships. That's not actually adding programming at any of the schools, because right now we're full, but that would be freeing up some slots. I just want to share, and I think it's important for the public to know, is that last year when the board closed out the budget, you had set, and I think our increase at that time, I want to say 2.3, 2.4, somewhere in there. The district received an additional $1.3 million after the budget closed. And the board at that time voted to return that $1.3 million to the taxpayers. And it ended up, because of the way the funding formula works, is that subsidy comes to Windham. It does not come to Raymond because they're a minimal receiver and haven't met their fiscal capacity. ended up going to reduced taxation in Wyndham, and I think actually for the first time since about 2009, 2010, was it resulted in a tax reduction. But this year, we're not going to get the additional $1.1 million. We're losing about $452,000 in subsidy year to year as compared to this year to last year. So when we started the budget process, I was hoping we'd see the additional $1.3 million that didn't materialize when that finally came. I think where this shows, and boy, you cannot read that on screen, but let me tell you what it is. It's kind of the story of what's happening with our state funding, that ED 279. 2022, the state share was roughly 45% of costs, and the local share was 55%. This year, with increasing valuations, call it a tax shift from the state to local. The locals are picking up 57% of the costs for what's seen for under the EPS formula, and the state's share is 42.9, somewhere in that point. So it's a tax shift is ultimately where it goes, and the state has what's called essential programs and services. It's a funding model. It was meant to be, when it was originally developed, to be what does a high-performing school need for services. What it's evolved to over time is how much money does the state have to spend on public education, and they back into a formula to determine how to evenly distribute that across. I also think it's helpful for the public and the board to understand where are we in comparison to other districts around us right now with their budgets. This is as of, we keep a shared spreadsheet, all the districts that are in Cumberland County. The one that's not in there right now, currently, I think is South Portland. This was the data that I had available to me today. And this is evolving because everyone else is working through their budget process. But just looking at where we fall from Brunswick being the highest of close to 14%, I'm sure that was a starting point. I don't know where this has been updated to. Remember, we started a little over 6. I know I just received for SAD 51 the budget notice, and they're at 5.4 at the moment. RSU 14, if you take out that pre-K portion, is 5.3, 5.4. Portland was 5.1. That's what Javier presented in the budget. And then you have some other ones above us, Scarborough, Cape, SAD 6. Yarmouth is that 9 is pretty steady. That's where their board is at the moment. And so it just kind of gives you a range of where people are at. And I think you're seeing other districts looking at some of the same supports that they're trying to put in for students. In addition, with this whole cadre of districts, tend to see some of the similar things with valuations going up and having to pick up more at the local level than maybe they would have had to have in the past. So just giving you an idea of where we are with budget history, and again, I want to remind the public and for those watching, I know we're not going to end at 537. I know that's not a reality. I know we're going to end up lower than that. This is our budget history, and last year that 2.86 did result in a tax decrease. Previous years though, 4.6, 5.4, and then kind of going back and forth between 2, 3, and 4. And then a 187 back in 13, 14. So we've kind of had a varied history. Part of that also has been how much subsidy we've received, how much of the support from the state, and how overall that funding formula is going to go ahead and impact us. So I think that's it, just kind of an overview of where we're at. Just also want to remind the board and also remind board members is that our practice has been especially when it comes to looking at additional percentages or things that you want us to take a look at for changes. We've always brought that back to the administrative team to then take a look at what's the impact district-wide, what's the impact of building, what's the impact of programs, are there services that we won't be able to offer, and then we would come back and bring a proposal to the board for what some of those changes. And I know there's been some interest in the past from the board to look at kind of a menu of options of what are some of the different things that you want to take a look at and what the impacts are. Just also want to draw your attention to the front page of the little budget book that I handed out. And I think what's helpful in this, and it was helpful for me just reviewing back and through, is that first of all, these are all the articles that get approved at the public budget meeting. And this is where the public will be voting up or down. But it also gives you an idea of where some of your increases are, what percentage of the budget some of those items are. And I can tell you that regular instruction is up because we have additional teacher positions that are there. So you'll see a little bit of a bigger increase there. Special education instruction, there's not as large of an increase as what you would normally see just because of the reduction of positions. CTE instruction is at 0, and that's not because we don't love CTE. It's because the state changed their funding formula, March, 4 years ago, and now direct subsidy goes right to the CTE centers.
Could you just define what that is, just for...
Career and technical education, sorry.
No, I know that, but just...
Paths in Westbrook Regional Vocational School. Technical training.
I know that. I'm just asking for the public.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then moving into, Article 4, other instruction, those are co-curriculars, not a huge increase there. Student and staff support, those are the social workers and other supports that you're seeing. System administration, that's Board of Education, Superintendent's Office, so all the back office functions for the district. School administration, the principals, the copiers. And then moving into transportation, not a huge increase. Facilities maintenance, a little bit of an increase. Debt service, we see a reduction because we're getting close to paying off the high school. And also our rent payment to the town of Wyndham for the transportation facility, that continues to drop. And then really where we are with child nutrition transfer and your budget reserve.
Chris, would you just define what the transfer means for child nutrition?
Yeah. The nutrition services and nutrition services for schools fall outside the budget. They have their own expenses, they have their own budget, and they really have to operate at a break even so that their food costs, employee costs have to equal what they're getting in for revenue. Something else we talked about in finance last night is also that includes if their equipment costs. So if we have a piece of equipment that goes down, they also have to recover that. Inevitably, at some point, they don't break even, and the district has to support. So that transfer would then have to help them with meals being free this year and with the amount of subsidy we're getting. I don't think for this current year we're going to need to do a transfer. We don't know yet the subsidy rate for what the state will be providing because the state has continued on with free meals, but the federal government hasn't, which we know will impact our reimbursement rate. And so we have some things that we want to address. And then the budget reserve is basically that is the pull in case of emergency for the board. If something goes down or we run into some issues that we need some additional funding. And, just a little budget 101 for everybody is that when the board approves and forwards a budget, and then when the public approves that budget, that's a debt ceiling. We cannot spend any more money out of the budget than what's approved. So even if we receive an additional $10 million in subsidy or $10 million as a gift, we are limited to $55,237,245. And so we end up getting to that ceiling. So I hope that's enough of an overview to kind of get you an idea of where we are as far as what was in this, what some of the numbers are. Really just open it up to some board discussion and determination, other areas that you want to take a look at.
Anybody have any comments? Sure.
So one of the things that I was thinking about after our meeting last night of the Finance Committee was the low return rate on the free and reduced applications. How often is it being sent out to request people to get those returned? Or is there like a drop dead date? And then how much education is being done to tell people why it's important to return those? So is it something that we could like send an email like every week or two and say, you need to get this returned to us and this is why?
It is something that, so Jeannie Riley, who's our food service director, I think reached out to every single person who has in the past completed applications to have them complete, and continues to connect with individuals to do that. This is not an issue that's unique to RSU 14. This is a statewide issue. And so there's also some other models looking at federal poverty level and other levels of economically disadvantage that you might be able to then use in order to, while we're in this time that we don't have the free and reduced numbers. What's hard is that not only do free and reduced impact Title I money, which comes to support interventions and other things, it's also figured into the 279 formula, and it is part of statute on how that's determined in the formula. And so it would require some changes in statute. And I know they're also looking at some hold harmless, which is looking at some past pre-COVID numbers to see where we're at. But I'll reconnect with Jeannie just to see how frequently we're sending those out, just to make sure that folks are getting the application. Then also with the, because Jeannie's Facebook page is quite active with nutrition services, and just how often are we hanging that off of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, is there any way that we can provide some support to Jeannie and like send some emails out to folks or something? I mean, I can spare 15 minutes to send some emails and harass people for information. But anyway, whatever we can do to help get this done, because it means a lot to the budget and what we can deliver to our children. One of the things that I talked about last night in the finance meeting, just so everybody's aware, is that, I would, let me back up a little. So part of my education, because this is my first budget, was understanding that we as a board can't control, or don't control, not can't, don't, particular line items and what's in the budget. We can shape the entire budget, but not specific line items. So my ask last night during our discussion was that we focus on direct education of kids versus ancillary cost centers. And I know that the RSU is very big into the arts and music and all that great stuff and sports, and we've had great success this last year, but I would prefer, my personal opinion, is that we focus the funds on direct education, and if we have to cut somewhere, it would be those ancillary areas. The other thing that I mentioned was that with the high inflation right now, and if anybody's bought lumber in the last year and a half, 2 years, you certainly know how much materials cost these days. So any projects that we have scheduled that could be put off for another budget year, hoping that a year from now when we're having this discussion again, that materials may be less expensive, the dollar may be stronger, so our money goes further for those projects that can be put off. I hate to say it, but I personally think we'll be in a recession in a year to a year and a half from now. So things, frankly, will be cheaper then. One of the things that I found was interesting with the presentation from last night was part of our package is that it gives an estimate of what the tax increase would be based on the percentage of increase. And so for assuming that the mill rates stay the same in Windham and Raymond for a $250,000 home, based on the increase as it sits now, it's a $251 increase for a Windham homeowner and $162 for a Raymond homeowner with a $250,000 home. And that, when you look at it in black and white, doesn't seem like a lot of money. It really doesn't. But when you add in the fact that it now costs twice as much to fill up your car with gas, heating oil, my last oil delivery was twice what it was a couple months before. Groceries are more expensive. So when you add all that stuff up, this, in its own little vacuum doesn't seem that much, but when you add it to all the other things that are increasing, it's a lot. And it could put some people over the tipping point, and so we need to recognize that and be able to really take a deep breath and suck in our gut and tighten the belts. And I'm not in any way insinuating that there's any fat in the budget. Please don't mischaracterize what I'm saying. But we need to take into consideration the folks that are not overly liquid these days. And that's the end of what I have to say for this section. Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment? I'm wondering, I know Finance met last night. I'm wondering if you discussed a target that you were comfortable with?
We never got to an actual target, but, I mean, we were all pretty much in agreement that it had to come down. It had to come down from where it is. Recognizing all the things that Char just mentioned. And so we talked about in past budget years, there's been categories. Chris was referring to priority items before, and we've been given lists in the past of if you want to cut this much, these are the items that would come off first.
Right.
If you feel like you need to cut more, these would be the next items. These are the ones that are going to hurt more.
Right.
And then the third level of this, is going to have an impact on education and so forth. So we've asked for that. That's some of the work that I believe Chris and the A-team started today. But as
Do you
far
have a
as the
target percentage, though, that you threw at him?
I think we all probably have personal
Okay.
targets
No, I
that we're
don't mean you
comfortable with,
personally, I mean
but so we did not come up with any
Okay.
consensus as a group. You'd say that.
I came away a little differently, which was to take a look at what 1% would look like, and then also to take a look at, because, again, there's two sides to our budget. One is there's a revenue side and there's an expense side, and looking at is there any additional ways that we can increase some revenue that would also have a similar impact to reducing taxation. So looking at both, or a combination of the two, and Stacy and I did some work on that today. Well, A-team's going to do some additional work, and we'll give you exactly that. But looking at kind of getting where we're at. And just to give everyone an idea, I mean, it's real simple math with our budgets. $55 million budget, 1% is $550,000. 2% is $1,100,000. So to look at what a percent would look like, or a percent greater, but looking at revenue side as well, to see where we're at.
I guess not being on finance, what's hard for me, not being in that discussion, although this was very valuable. What our comfort level is, when I look at proposed additions, reductions, the additions are, in my opinion, when you look at a bus driver, an ELL teacher, grade 4, I mean, you cannot have those positions. You cannot have a grade 5 teacher, in my opinion, or a math teacher or a music teacher. I mean, those are instructional, in my opinion, must-haves. And we've talked about the importance of the social workers, given the complexities of our students' makeup right now. And so I certainly would not suggest a reduction in that. And even the technology integrator is much emphasis, and we've all learned through COVID the importance of technology. I mean, that's a must position for me as well. So I don't know whether you all want to go with bring back a 1%, bring back a 1.5%. But time is of the essence, and he, the superintendent, has to meet with the A-team to come up with a list, so that we can talk about it again next week.
And I would agree with you, Kate. To look through the lists and to make our opinions on I really think we need a technology integrator. And that's easy to do, but again, I'll fall back on the fact that, we can't make those decisions.
I'm not suggesting
No, but I'm saying that's the mindset that
Right.
I go into it with, and I have trust in Chris and trust in the A-team that if we give them the direction that it needs to come down,
They'll set the priority.
they'll set the priority, exactly. And
Right.
that's the next piece that I'm anxious
Right.
to see.
So I just want to make sure that when he has his marching orders, that he doesn't come back and it's like, well, that's not really enough. Do you know what I mean? That you need to go back because we didn't go low enough. So maybe a tiered kind of process. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. You and I have been through many, many of these over the years. And the thing, too, is I think people have to remember that the budget that we have and Chris's and the A-team's capability, especially Chris's, of being able to change this is not totally reliant on this teacher, that teacher. I know Chris is, and going through this and through this with John Davis previously, there are other ways of being able to
Those are the
lower,
line items.
just so people know, it doesn't mean that we have to go in and say, okay, we're gonna go wipe out all of these things that folks ask for. And believe me, I'm not sure how he does the magic, anybody in his position, but they do, and they're able to find, and there's ways and that things are adjusted, like we don't have what the final figure is for what the insurance, the healthcare is yet. There are, in the past, we've moved some of the debt service stuff. No, I love this we thing. I'm almost like the nurse, the person in the hospital says, how we doing today, But anyway, Chris and the A-team, and personally, I myself would feel comfortable if we were somewhere around 4%. That's just my feel, because I think I would feel comfortable when I bump into people saying, explaining why it would be that. I don't think I could possibly, Chris knows, explain 5.3%. So that's kind of my thought.
Thank you. Anybody else have any? We want to make sure that we give Chris clear direction of what we want to see next time we meet.
Can I say one more thing?
Go for it.
Okay, and one more thing though, and I know we don't pick the spots or whatever, but but this one particular thing I feel kind of strong, like she feels about athletics. Well, the ed techs, giving them those extra hours, I don't think really costs us anything because we saved a lot of money by giving up 10 or 11 positions, which more than will justify, and these are not, they've already benefited, so it's just giving them each 3 hours extra. And I think I already had mentioned that to Chris. I would not want to touch that. That's my personal opinion. I'm done, I promise.
No, this is very important if you have anything else.
No, and I guess it goes back to, and this goes back to the priority, is that we always take a look at what's closest to the kids, and then work our way outward. And obviously, we want to have clean, safe schools and make sure that we're able to offer all the programs. It's not magic, Marge, but we
I
do
know it
take
isn't magic, but you make it look that
we
appear
take
that
a
way.
look at other funding sources, or we look at a way to possibly reduce debt and other possibilities. Stacy is wonderful at that as well, as far as taking a look at some ways. We've identified some things that we'll take a look at. We'll be bringing to the A-team on Tuesday. My suggestion, if I could go with that, would be to bring back what is 3/4, what is 1, what is 1 1/4 percent reductions. What do those look like? Because that's going to get you pretty close to a little bit over 4. And use that as a starting point to give you an idea of what those tiers look like and what you get into. I think if you're going to go to If you're getting into a 2% reduction, that's going to get into direct programming and things that are currently existing that that would be getting deep into things. Scott has his hand raised.
Oh, I can't see him, so sorry.
Sorry.
It's all right. I wanted everybody else to have an opportunity. So, I know that I brought it up last night, and I don't know. Chris, please let me know if I am crazy. But what does the scenario look like with a pay-to-play option for athletics? And would that be a source of revenue to help offset some of the costs? Because I agree with Kate in the aspect that a lot of these positions that are being recommended, I believe that they are going to be a tremendous asset to our schools and our education. But to Marge's point, 5.75% is it's a big jump. And just to open up the doors when we are looking at 4.5% increase, we're not able to really kind of mess around too much here. We're only talking maybe 1.5% maximum, just to open up the doors. So I wanted to put that out to the board. I know that it would be a controversial topic, but we need to do our due diligence and make sure that we are exploring all possible options. That's all I had to say.
Marge?
Only because I was around, as Kate was, the last time this came up. And we did, and there was a deep dive into the pay-to-play, because actually, I think I brought it up myself. So there was a deep dive into it. Rich Drummond did a lot of research on it. God, this is like a few years ago. And what happened was the benefit of it, believe it or not, from a financial standpoint, was pretty insignificant as to what you would bring in. I'm not saying that it can't be looked at again, but back when we did, in fact, I sound like you now, but I still have the package that we put together at that time. And the reason we didn't implement it was because it was something like $70,000 for I don't know, but it wasn't a large figure anyway that we would get. But that's not saying we can't look at it, but I'm saying we have thought of that in the past and we have looked at it, and I'm sure you probably, in your office somewhere, you might have
I
something.
think what I can do, and I can add it in the board packet this week, is see if I can pull that research up, Scott. I think somebody must still have that presentation, and just take a look at it, and I can throw it in the packet. Because I don't even remember what the amount was. I want to say it was $75 a sport.
I can't remember,
I
but
think was the target amount.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge of that would be that, that would be something that would have to be voted on in itself. And
Yep.
in the time frame that we're talking about for
Right.
this year's
Can't do it.
budget,
It's not.
it's not something
Late.
that's going to help us this year. But not to say that it can't be explored, but, that can be a topic, but that creates a whole lot of socioeconomic disparity too and participation, so.
well, because then it became a thing that we also had to put funds aside for scholarships because you had to make it equal opportunity for all students to be able to participate. So that was just another piece of it, but we should look at it.
Yes.
So does anybody know of another church that wants to rent the auditorium throughout the course of the year?
Sure.
Just a kind of a crazy thought, and I don't know if it's possible, but is there a way to tie how much someone would pay for pay-to-play to their free and reduced applications?
That would be cool.
Except for the National School Lunch Program, NSLP, if you ever come across that, that's what it stands for, is anonymous.
Oh, yeah.
And the only person who gets to know is Jeannie Riley, and because she processes the applications. So,
It was a try.
no, it's
I just know.
anything that's a carrot.
When we discussed it before, and Pete's right, this is bigger than the time frame that we have.
Oh, yeah.
It involves a tremendous amount of public input. And we don't have the gift of that time to implement that, but it certainly is something in the future that we could look at. Are we clear on the marching orders and in agreement with what Chris has proposed? So that next week, he will have, well, he'll meet with the A-team, and then next week he'll bring a couple of different tiered proposals for us to consider.
And you're thinking the top tier is going to be like a 1 1/4 to get us down closer to the 4. Does anybody want to see something more than that?
Go ahead.
It might be good just to see the numbers for 1.5, just to be able to do a comparison.
Yeah.
I can live with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah, it's definitely doable. It will be, we'll do it.
Marge?
Is there any way that you could email that to us prior to the meeting so everybody has time to look at it? So, at least we'll have seen
I think
it
what I can,
before then, or a couple
what I
of
can
days
do
before?
is after Tuesday's A-team meeting, I can send you notes then so that you can have it ahead of time.
Yeah, doesn't have to be way ahead, just so we have like a day or two to.
That'd be
kind of-
helpful for discussion purposes.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Everybody, go ahead, Mike.
So, like you, it's my first time in a long time doing this, and it seemed like every time you brought up an addition, Scott yelled, I'm for that, which kind of took my legs out. I was like, okay, can't go against that because Scott thinks it's a good thing. So it sounds like the veterans here have a lot of trust in what you're doing. I've looked through it, and I guess I'd be interested to hear, and see what you have next week. I think it would be helpful to have the bigger number, just again, per perspective. But it doesn't really sound like anybody's looking to cut this budget a lot. So it might be, for me, it might be really helpful to hear what you think could go. And just the sports thing, I don't know. I always have to process. I'll get in the car and drive, but boy, I don't think I'd be for. I mean, it would again bring me. What have we added to the school that now we're charging for sports? Because sports has been here forever. So I know we're not going to do it anyway, but I would struggle with that. I think so. But I look forward to what you bring next week.
Are we good? Perfect. Thank you. Item number, right on time almost. Item number 9, nope, item number 10, policies. I guess I'll do the motion and then I'd like to share something. So may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the revised reading of policy IMB, teaching about controversial issues.
Second.
Thank you. And before we get to public comment, if there is any, I just wanted to review, because I'm not sure folks in general know how the policy committee works. And it's 4 members. It's, help me, Kate, Jessica, Mike, me, and then Chris and Christine also meet. So that's the committee, and the process is, for example, I'll just use the motion that we're discussing now, IMB. So we pull out IMB, our current policy, and then we also look at Drummond Woodsum's recommendations for policies, and they put together a draft, and often we look at MSMA's draft and kind of do a side-by-side. The committee puts forth a recommendation after a lot of discussion. And in, I think, all 3 of these cases, we had Drummond and Woodsum provide legal guidance and took, a deep dive and looked at it and made recommendations as well. So we really, really scrutinize it, but at the end of the day, we bring forth a recommendation, and now this proposal is for the board to decide whether they want to move forward with the recommendations. So seeing that I've gone on and on, Let me see if there's any public comment on IMB.
Need a motion, please?
I did.
I'm sorry.
You're sounding like me now. Any public comment on IMB? Okay. Any board discussion? Yep.
So I read through this, and I can appreciate how difficult you guys had dealing with this, where it's such a hot topic these days. My first question, so I've got two. First one is, number one, discussion of controversial issues shall be appropriate to the age, grade, and maturity of the students involved. My question is, who decides what is appropriate?
And I'm turning it over to
Sure.
our administrators.
Sure. A couple things will go ahead and guide that. One is main learning results. And if you've had a chance to ever take a look at the main learning results, it's actually built into grade spans. And you can, what's kind of fun about it is that you can take a look at, for a particular grade level, and let's say science standards, here's what's appropriate for K to 2 span, here's appropriate 3 to 5, here's appropriate 6, 8, and then here's appropriate for high school level. And it goes everything from the health curriculum to science to social studies, and really it's increasing complexity. So that's a component of it. Another component of it would be journal recommendations for what's the age level for a particular book or for a particular topic that's being done. In addition, there may be national resources or national guides that may go ahead and provide some of that. But most of learning results stuff is right straight out of the learning results and has that gradation of what's appropriate for all the different levels.
So basically, it comes from agencies such as the Maine Department of Education.
Yep, or groups that were national standards that were then adopted as the main learning results.
And then, I read down through this, and I know adults take everything to the nth extreme, but I also know that kids can as well, because they learn from their parents and the adults in their lives. So when a teacher is dealing with a sensitive or controversial issue or something that could be, I'm assuming that they take steps to ensure that no one is made to feel uncomfortable or bullied by their perspective. And I'm assuming that happens. I would like to think that that happens across the board. But could you share what some normal steps would be if there were something contentious brought up in a class, and where it was kind of kids pitting against each other? What's some normal things that would happen in those situations?
And one of the things that our staff and are really good at is maintaining that kind of that middle ground, and oftentimes encouraging conversation on different viewpoints and providing opportunities for students to share on both sides of it. I think where you see that in maturity of conversations is especially as you go up through the grade level. I know Becca and Hannah have shared some great discussions with kids in their classroom where I'm trying to remember the different yellows. One was dandelion, one was another, and a discussion about why something was in a box of crayons, whereas Pete Small in an advanced social studies class might be talking about an idea of why a terrorist group is taking one stance and why a group another, and then walking the middle and allowing kids to have those conversations. So going with that complexity out and through, so trying to maintain that line. Another thing that I know that our staff does is that if there's a unit or something else where there may be, someone may see something that's controversial, getting information out to parents, letting them know, opportunities for parents to ask questions. Also opportunity for, I've seen a lot of individuals and a lot of classrooms moving towards choice. So moving away from strict canon of materials to here's some choice, here's some things that you possibly can look at for choice. And actually having that opportunity to then say, this book's not a good fit. And this policy provides that if a student's reading a book, and I think this goes back to when we were talking about IJJ, and a parent says, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable with my student, then working with a staff member that what's an alternate text. Because most, if not all, of the general curriculum is either main learning results, adaptation of the main learning results, and then a lot of work that's done to then support interpretation of that or choice of that. Our teachers, and I'm trying to remember who talked about it tonight with, Christine did, with PLGs and also some of the GT, their PLCs, teachers talking about curriculum and looking at the best ways to do that. So some kind of peer work with that as well.
So, you know, this doesn't, what I'm going to say next doesn't specifically fit in this policy, but I think it's kind of where I'm headed, the road I'm headed on. So I learned today that at Wyndham Middle School recently, identification buttons were handed out to those that wanted to be involved with announcing their pronouns. And with the other recent testimony brought forth by parents, and I know it hasn't been corroborated on a specific scale, but I find it troublesome that things like that, controversial subjects, could be used by kids to bully each other and pressure them to take a position just to fit in. I was extremely troubled when I found out about what happened at the middle school. Not only from a parent perspective, even though I don't have a child in that school, I can see, just based on the feedback my child gives me from what happens in the high school, that peer pressure is a big deal. And for the school to be supportive of kids labeling themselves with an actual physical label really is troublesome for me, because and frankly, where's the line in the sand? You know, if today we're supporting kids to label what pronouns they are, tomorrow is it going to be how they identify as a gender? Or is it going to be identifying themselves with a label of what race they are or what culture or anything like that? I was extremely disturbed to find out about it, and I'm not expecting you to respond because I know I'm catching you off guard with this.
No, and I'd be happy to respond.
But I was extremely troubled by it because peer pressure is a real deal, and it has been forever. But I think it's worse now than it ever has been. So, thank you.
No, and I think, you know, one of the questions that, you know, someone asked me is that controversial issues and how does this apply to clubs and other activities? You know, all RSU 14 policies, you know, I think one thing that's difficult with this policy is that people, and we've heard these comments as well, you know, should we label what are controversial issues? And the advice from the attorney is not to label because there's a range of what's controversy. There's a range for clubs and activities. There's also quite a bit of case law for support of student activities and things that go on with that. So some of those lines become difficult as far as, you know, what are student rights for expression, and under First Amendment rights, how clubs can actually operate a little bit differently because it's not a mandatory activity. And I think, Shar, what you bring up is a good point, is when the activity, at what point does it impact the school? And when does it transition from being a choice event to being a mandatory event? Because mandatory would be very different than a student who chooses to participate. So things that are clubs and activities and things that are student-driven, one thing that the law recognizes is that if you have a chess club and a student wants to have club that you're talking about, then you have to give equal opportunity for that particular club and those activities to happen. So it's definitely a challenging piece, and I think even what is considered to be, or what one individual defines now as controversial, is difficult to even determine because different people see different things as being controversial subjects and topics. So certainly understand.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Marge?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of get that, because I have a grandson who's in the middle school, and if somebody was offering pin, I can guarantee you, he would take a pin without reading it and put it on. And, you know, and then, of course, it'd be a problem when somebody called him something that he wasn't. But my other thing on this is, and I read it a couple times, and I'm just trying to figure out, when we get down to number 6, which basically says the students or their parents who object, et cetera, may request an accommodation. I think, I don't know how that happens, because a lot of times the parents don't find out that the student has it till after they're already into it. So I guess, how is that handled?
So, for a student who would want to have an accommodation, first thing is that we always recommend that parents reach out to classroom teachers so that they understand what's going on. Part of this, and also looking at the policy, and it's been a while since we probably have done professional development on it, is, for staff to then incorporate the principal in, to then walk through the process if somebody's looking for an objection. I think one thing that's a little bit difficult here, and that's not always a neat, clean-cut process, is that so much of our curriculum is built on the main learning results and are considered to be required pieces of instruction. To be able to determine how do you facilitate something else with that in order to make sure that they receive that required instruction, and then also that opportunity to look at what is it particularly about that topic or that particular book or that particular component of instruction that they are having difficulty with.
Yeah, that didn't quite answer my question.
Okay.
I think you misunderstood me. I think what I'm trying to say is,
How do they do it?
no, this.
How do they find out?
How does the parent find out? Because it's usually after or the process is going on. Unless, because there's nothing here that says that you have to get, if you think something might be controversial, unless it's in another policy, there's nothing here that says the parent needs to give their approval prior to. It basically says in 6 that if they object, which they will find out after the fact, then they can say,
Not necessarily.
well, it doesn't, that's what I'm saying, is it something that says you need to get a parent's approval prior to giving their child what could be a controversial issue. Am I reading this wrong? You know what
No, I think the way I read 6 is that if a parent is looking for an accommodation, and I think of a recent example where a letter was sent home, here's the unit we're going to be doing, here are the books that are available to kids, if you have questions, kind of reach out, and there's an opportunity to go ahead and ask questions and to learn a little bit more, and I think, what are the opportunities, what are the things that kids are going to be working on. That would be done because, again, controversial topics, something that may not be controversial to me may be controversial to somebody else, and you may not discover at the end, and it may be something within our general curriculum that someone has a deep belief that might be different than what might actually be the main learning results.
Yeah, but it doesn't always go home ahead of time. Basically, I hate to go back to that same subject of, I'm sure the parents weren't told that the kids were going to, does anybody have a problem? The kids are going to identify themselves with a pin today.
Well,
I'm talking about things that happen, like, that isn't foretold ahead of time. It's.
Yeah, and I think
That's all.
something that is a club or an activity, or a club that's doing a choice activity is going to be different than what's going to be happening in the general curriculum.
Right.
All right.
And all of our curriculum is on our website. So if your child comes home and says, we're doing XYZ, and you are not sure, you could hop onto our website where it's pretty detailed, yes?
I have Scott here, and then Al also pointed his hand at me.
Yeah, I was just thinking at the high school, pretty much all the teachers send home a syllabus at the beginning of the year, and I think pretty much all the English teachers will list all the books that we're reading for the entire year about a year ahead of time. So if there's anything especially controversial, we hear about it ahead of time. The parents have to sign off on the syllabus, so information like that, curriculum-based, usually gets out pretty early, at least in the high school.
Scott?
Go ahead, Scott.
I can't see you, so I'm sorry, I don't see your hand.
Thanks, Chris. I just had a quick question. So does this policy also include personal libraries of educators? So it may not be necessarily on the curriculum, but it may be on their wall in the classroom. Does this policy cover that as well?
This would cover it. Policy ACAA, which is an ACA, which is the anti-discrimination policy, would cover it. Teaching about political subjects, political things would also fall into it. There's a whole bunch of different ones, this being one of them as well, Scott.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Jenny?
Just a quick question. How often does materials get challenged or ask for replacements? Do we know?
I would have to get that information for you.
I think it might be helpful just to see how large an issue or small an issue it is, just for clarity's sake.
Mike?
Just to follow up, because I got texts about the thing today as well. I guess, was it today? It was today, right? So does it not fit within this policy when clubs, I guess my confusion is when we talked about the civil rights team, and you kind of gave the same answer that the civil rights team is a student-led thing. And then in our budget, the Raymond Middle School, their top goal was to expand the civil rights team. And that made me think, ooh, wait a minute, is it a school thing? And I guess, I think it happened in the same school, the gender survey we talked about. Was it the middle school? Yeah, yes. So makes me think, okay, boy, that's been on my mind for the whole time I've been here. I wonder why that didn't ring any bells for people that are there every day. That it would be a controversial, and I agree with you, a controversial, we talked today, eye of the beholder, but having the fallout we had from the gender discussion, that this would have rang some bells today. So I guess more of a comment than a question, but.
Yeah, and actually, if I can just speak to it, I think, yes, the survey's been discussed at a couple board meetings. I think the policy was at ILD, which you're going to be taking a look at here in a few minutes. I think we'll address that. And I think, Mike, part of also the difference is that there's looking at difference between choice-based activities and things that are part of a mandatory curriculum or a mandatory experience for students.
Can you expound on that?
If a club or an activity, or let's say in this district, there's been a day of silence for years, back to the late 90s, that Civil Rights Team or Gay Straight Alliance or some other group has sponsored. Students don't have to participate in that. Mm-hmm. That's a choice-based activity. And so choice-based activity for a trained advisor who's working with a Civil Rights Team, that is somebody, students are choosing to participate in that. It's not part of a required curriculum.
Right. No, I got that when you said it, but then I saw it was like the featured goal in the Raymond Middle School. So it made me think, well, that sounds kind of important if it's their featured thing, that the school must have their fingers in it on some level. So if I'm confused, I'm guessing somebody on TV might be confused. Yep. So.
So, just to follow up comments, I think we're getting lines blurred between club activities and curriculum. And maybe there's a policy that divides the two. I don't know. I'm not an expert on policy, the RSU policies. But I do think that there's a huge, ginormous difference between honoring a moment of silence and putting labels on children. And the potential for children to feel peer pressured to label themselves. I have a huge problem with that personally. And like I said a few minutes ago, where's the line in the sand? If they, they're labeling each other or wanting to label each other with their preferred pronouns, what's next? And I really think that there needs to be some discussion around that. And I would hate to think that someday that a student-led group will decide that it's a good idea to label or support labeling based on protected classes and things like that. And it's, my entire profession is around treating people with equality. And when you start labeling people, it gets you into big, giant legal hot water in my realm of profession, but it also can get really messy really quick. So I'll end my commentary by saying if parents are concerned, they need to talk to their students' teachers. And so I'll go back on my other soapbox that parents need to be working with their students' teachers, and they should have an understanding. So because controversy is in the eye of the beholder, and sensitive is in the eye of the beholder, and what I deem controversial or sensitive, somebody else may not, or be far in the other direction. So I think as a parent, you're not doing the teacher or your child any favors by not getting involved, not developing a relationship so the teacher understands what your sensitivities are, so then it can be addressed before something happens versus after. Because it doesn't do the teacher any good if you haven't communicated what your expectations are and had a dialogue. Because the teacher doesn't know. They don't know that you might have an issue with something that happens in the class that's part of the normal education in the classroom. So parents and teachers need to partner to best educate the children. Thank you.
Any other comment on this? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, as being on that committee, these were interesting things that and I guess there's two more coming, were pretty interesting things to talk about. And I don't know that there are right answers. Even the titles of these policies we were kind of discussing. But for me, as I thought about them, it made sense. Two things. One was, I think we were trying to lay out a process. So for the examples we just gave, or any others, that there was a process to follow. This would give you a sense of where you could go. And, at least in my time, you learn to start at the beginning. You start with the teacher, you start with the principal, you kind of follow a path. And, at some point you get somewhere maybe. But that was, I think, one intent of it. And the other one I just blanked on, so I guess I'm done.
You did well. Any final comments before we vote on this policy? And this is just strictly because there were so few revisions, just a revised policy.
And you have to do
Oh, we have to do a raised hand, huh? Or what? Vocal, right.
Sorry, I'm looking for my voting sheet.
Because Scott is on Zoom, we have to vote in a different manner.
Is it on your computer?
Oh, right here. I've got too many papers going here.
I know.
Kate Bricks,
Yes.
Jessica Bridges,
Yes.
Jenny Butler,
Yes.
Marge Gavoni,
Yes.
Pete Hensler, Char Jewell,
Yes.
Kate Levier,
Yes.
Scott McLean,
Yes.
Mike McClellan.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Moving on. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the first reading of revised policy IMBB, accommodation of sincere beliefs in required instruction.
Seconded.
Thank you. Again, we followed the same process reviewing this, and we had input from a variety of sources, and I look forward to any comment you might have.
Public comment?
Public comment. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Seeing none, let's do board comment. No comment? Of course there's comment.
Of course there is. So I'm going to go back to what Marge was getting to on the last motion. And I understand. So Al, thank you for piping up and saying that syllabuses are sent out. So I apparently have failed as a parent because I don't think I ever got one for my child who's a freshman in high school. So I will have to figure that one out. It's amazing how much I've learned about stuff so far this year. Anyway, But I do want to make sure that parents have opportunity to know what's going on well ahead of time. And again, I'll say, if you're not partnering with your child's teachers, you need to be. And if you're not, shame on you. So I just want to make sure that the opportunity for advance notice is well-defined and supported, and so there's no friction happening. That's my goal in life, is to reduce friction. So just advance notice is extremely important.
If I can just speak to that just for 1 second. On the curriculum site, on the website, are all the curriculum guides, K-8, and then high school has just been dumping them in this week and getting them updated. You can actually see every single course and the guides that are involved with that. Many of them, because I was perusing them for another project, have the books that are used within those courses, that there's plenty of opportunity to take a look at that. Also, just want to suggest, if you have not seen a syllabus, teachers' site, their Google site's most likely going to have it. I'll just confirm that. So as a place in order to be able to get that. But again, also to reach out to staff members and start that dialogue if there's some questions about topics or other things. And I agree with you. Part of it also is engaging in a conversation with your student. What are you talking about today in this particular class?
Anybody else?
Scott's got his hand raised.
Excellent.
Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to, I have one piece of concern with this policy. It is the last sentence in the fourth paragraph down. And it basically says, the parent's legal guardian may appeal to the superintendent, whose decision shall be final. So, Chris, all due respect, I find it hard to believe that you would ever rule against a parent's wishes, but you may not always be the superintendent. So that phrase is a little concerning for me. Why is it that that final decision solely rests on you versus myself, who may have some serious concerns with the curriculum that's being taught?
I think, Scott, what this particular sentence is designed for is if something's a graduation requirement. So if you have a sincere belief against capitalism and you don't want your student to participate in a personal finance course, then that is a required component of RSU 14 policy. So I think it's meant for those types of situations. You're absolutely right. If it's a particular topic, we're going to work with a family to try to figure out what's the best way to do that topic. I think this is geared towards, I have a sincere belief against physical education, and my student will not participate in that. It's a required, and basically it defines what the appeals process is to go to that point. I think this is meant for those larger graduation things.
Okay. Would it make sense then for, I'm sorry, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first reading?
Yep.
Okay, would it make sense for us to add some sort of phrase in there that does somewhat clarify exactly what you're referring to?
I mean, we can go back. That language is verbatim from the Drummond and Woodsum sample. That particular sentence in their sample says whose decision shall be final. I guess we could ask them if there was a reason for that.
Yeah, if we gotta ask the question, then let's go ahead and ask the question. But I think that it's worth exploring, because if I'm just reading it for the first time, I'm as a parent, I'm going to ask this question. So I think that if we need to ask Drummond and Woodsum, does it make sense to add some clarifying language to this?
We can do that.
And
Sure.
let's go ahead and do that.
Sure, we can do that.
That was good comment, Scott. I'm wondering, as you read the, I guess, E, it kind kind of, does that kind of say that though, Chris? The principal is considering, you know, what the legal obligations are, learning results, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that covers what you're saying, but it kind of does.
Yeah, it absolutely could.
Yeah, I think it gives some more definition to it.
Yep, no, I appreciate that, Mike, thank you.
Sure. Here for you.
Is he all set?
Yep.
Oh, okay, we don't have to go back. I think he said,
He's good to go.
he's all set. He's all set, it's in here. You missed it, right?
I'm like,
Sorry, we were.
sorry,
He's all set. This explains.
we're good. Is that the bottom line?
Yep,
We're good?
We're good.
E covers what
We're good.
Scott's good with it.
Okay.
I got a
Thank you.
thumbs up on my screen.
Excellent, thank you, Scott, appreciate that. So, any other comment? All right. Yep,
I'd just be curious to see how often this gets used also. I'm the numbers person.
I have been here for 26 years, 8 years as high school principal and 4 years in central office, and I've never had to do this. So in the last 12 years. How's that?
Never say never.
Sorry.
okay. Final. Final. All those in favor?
Kate Bricks,
Yes.
Jessica Bridges, sorry.
Yes.
Jenny Butler,
Yes.
Marge Gavoni.
Yes.
Pete Hensler.
Yes.
Char Jewel,
Yes.
Kate Levier.
Yes.
Scott McLean,
Yes,
Mike McClellan.
Yes.
Okey dokey. Let us move on to, may I have a motion?
I move to approve the first reading of revised policy ILD, educational research, student submission to surveys, and marketing information.
Second.
Thank you. Any public comment? Okay, board discussion. ILD, educational research, student submission to surveys and marketing information analysis or evaluations. No.
Scott's got his hand raised.
Okay. I'm looking for comment from the board. And I would love to hear from Mr. McLean.
You're up.
Love it.
thank you, Madam Chair. I just, after reading through all three policies, I wanted to give a big kudos to the policy committee. You guys have worked pretty hard so far this year, and based on the policies and the revised policies that are coming out of this committee, it does tell me that, excuse me, you guys are listening to what the public has to say, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I know that sometimes thank yous are far and few between for a lot of us. So I just wanted to give you guys a shout out and say you guys are doing a great job. So thank you.
Well, I wish I could see your face when you said that. Thanks,
don't.
Scott. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. No, I'm sincere. Thank you for those comments. Anybody else on ILD? Okay.
So I'm pleased to see the new section for notice to parents regarding surveys. And so I'm assuming that section would apply to things like the survey that happened at Wyndham Middle School last spring, that's what that's referring to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's two types of surveys that are here. One is we need to do the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, which is a requirement of the district to do. That actually has its own notice, which fulfills all the requirements of what's the survey, gives people an opportunity to come in and take a look at it. Also gives plenty of notice and opportunity, and that really is handed through, I think Pan Atlantic Consulting is the one that does that survey for the state of Maine. This also talks about other surveys that happen and making sure that there's a reasonable amount of time that's given to parents an opportunity to do that. I will tell you an unintended consequence of this policy is that we are now saying no to surveys, and I think it's something that we're going to need to work through a procedure, which I'll give you a great example. Many schools, like Wyndham High School, have gone to capstone projects, and we've received several requests over the last, I would say, month and a half, for other seniors and other districts to send surveys to our students, which we have said no, that we're not participating in. I think we've got to figure out a procedural piece, because I know many of our capstone kids are going to be doing their own research, and they're going to be wanting to connect with their peers, and so part of it might be that everything, making sure it's clearly defined as choice versus a mandatory piece, but just making sure that there's some notice. But for the moment, we basically have said we're not going to support other schools and being able to do any of those surveys. It's just not worth it at this point.
Okay. Does this policy apply to surveys sponsored by student groups?
At this point, we're going with notice for all surveys,
Okay, good,
period.
great. And it says there'll be, parents, guardians will be provided with a copy. This is under notice to parents. How? It says provided a copy, but it doesn't say how. Is it, or is it left open intentionally?
Well, it could be a link, it could be an actual copy of the survey, it could be an opportunity to come in, or it could be...
Is it in the handbooks too?
Yes, you can...
We were going to add this to the annual Infinite Campus process you'll now go through to review your information. And there's a section on policies. There's some information already that you have to review. This can be added to that if you think that's a good next step. It's just one more that folks review and then sign off that they have reviewed and proceed to the rest of the info.
Yeah,
Does that-
that's,
okay.
that's all I had, thank you.
Anybody else? I don't see any.
Just add the one other thing this
Sure.
includes, because this also includes, and this is the second part, which is marketing. There are firms out there that want to have access to student data. We are very careful as far as how we release student data. In fact, to the extent, unless we need required to do that under law for recruiters and things, we don't. So we notify parents of that. There's a privacy piece in here, and then at the end of the policy, there is a complaint procedure. So if you feel that there's an issue with student privacy in regards to a survey, there's the place where you can actually send your complaint to the U.S. Department of Education Student Privacy Office, and the address and the email address for that.
Okay. Final. Okay. All those in favor?
Kate Bricks?
Yes.
Jessica Bridges?
Yes.
Jenny Butler?
Yes.
Marge Gavoni?
Yes.
Pete Hensler?
Yes.
Char Jewel?
Yes.
Kate Levier?
Yes.
Scott McLean?
Yes.
Mike McClellan?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Item number 11, report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes of the March 23rd, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Any public comment or discussion? All those in favor?
Kate Bricks?
Yes.
Jessica Bridges?
Yes.
Jenny Butler?
Yes.
Marge Gavoni?
Yes.
Pete Hensler?
Yes.
Char Jewel?
Yes.
Kate Levier?
Yes.
Scott McLean?
Abstain.
Mike McClellan?
Yes.
Very good. On to item Roman numeral 12. Committee reports. I'm going straight to our student representative. Oh, caught you off guard.
you did, all right.
Shaking it up here.
Couple things. First off, I wanted to congratulate the Wyndham High School 1X. We got 4th place at our event last Saturday. Also wanted to congratulate the high school quiz show team. We had our recording in Lewiston yesterday. Results aren't public yet, but they said soon, so we have no idea what that means.
Scrutinizing your face, actually.
The Jordan Small Middle School has a play. They are doing Willy Wonka, and that's on the 8th and the 9th. And finally, the class of 2023 is hosting another bottle drive to help fundraise for prom and senior events, and that is this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Canopy entrance.
Oh, good. Okay.
And Alf, if I can just add one more thing.
Absolutely.
I was in the high school Monday and noticed that the collection for prom dresses and formal attire is continuing onward. So if anybody out there has old prom dresses or formal attire, other things that they would like to donate. There's a nice rack of things that are there, and it's a great opportunity to help some kids out. And so anybody who wants to share with that, they'll gladly take those donations right at the front door to the high school.
Perfect. You all set?
Oh.
What?
I just have a quick question. I'm assuming that whoever is going to be the recipient of this clothing probably wants them cleaned and pressed, so do we have a fund to help with donations to help pay for that?
We are working on exactly who we're going through at this moment. We have some places that might do it for free or at a reduced cost, so we're still working on exact details for that, but they will be cleaned.
Good. Let's go to finance.
Finance. All right. Chris has stolen a lot of the thunder because
I know.
we met last night over Zoom, but there were a few items that didn't get touched on tonight. We looked at spending year to date. This would have been through the end of February. So end of February, that would be 8 months through the fiscal year. So 66% of the way through. And with the warrant articles, there was 36% remaining unspent. So that's really right on track.
Okay.
Some of the cost centers, or some of the warrant article centers, you get the money paid out a lot at the beginning of the year, whether it's facilities doing summer projects, and then a lot of it, like the instruction and so forth, is spread out more evenly throughout the year. We are realizing some savings at this point in some of the educational areas, the instruction areas like special ed, because of all the unfilled positions that we've seen. So it's still probably a little too early to forecast where we're going to end up in terms of overall spending for the year, but that was just an update that we had. We talked about the possibility of establishing a capital reserve account for Jeannie in nutrition.
Yep.
It's kind of a rarity this year that she may end up with a bit of a surplus just because of, all the lunches being free and the high reimbursement rates. So typically, and Chris touched on this, if there's an oven or a dishwasher or something that's needed, we have to find ways to cover that. A lot of times it comes out of Bill's budget. But if we were to establish, a reserve account specifically for nutrition, then that could slowly get spent down over time.
Good.
To help cover some of those unexpected costs. We talked about the upcoming need to cover some of the middle school costs.
Right.
The stuff that we have to put up front that we will be reimbursed for eventually, and that was about 1.1 million, and we just got a view into all those different costs and what that breakdown is. Chris,
What does
I
that
don't know.
do? When do we have to pay that?
Chris, you can probably answer that better than I can.
When is the 1.2 that he mentioned?
So we have $175,000 that we will be spending this year through June 30. That difference there, so it'll be the additional $900,000 between July 1 and the referendum. So it will be all of next year, and then those are reimbursable costs. The other thing we talked about last night is that every contract that we're doing now with LaValle Brendinger, not only does it get RSU 14 signature, but the state of Maine is signing off on those contracts as well, and they're negotiating directly with the state construction office to make sure that things are closely followed with that as well. We signed contracts today specifically for environmental study, facility study, and also the vernal pool study.
Okay.
So things are moving quickly, and I can share a little bit more when we get to facilities construction here in a second.
So then, the rest of the meeting centered on the budget changes that Chris went over with us tonight, and just the discussion about where we wanted to see things head. So
Okay.
that's what we had.
Good, thank you. Well, you had plenty to say. Mr. McLean, The man behind the curtain there, any other additions for facilities or middle school construction?
Yeah, so facilities is going to be meeting on next week on the 6th at, I believe, 5 o'clock. And we'll get an update from Mr. Hanson. And then I believe the next meeting for middle school building will be on, I believe it's the 7th. Is that
Yep.
correct, Chris?
Yep, it's next Thursday night.
Yep, okay. And then as far as what's been happening between next meeting and the last middle school meeting, I'm gonna kick it over to Chris, and he just started enlightening us a little bit, so take it away.
Yeah, so we have 2 studies that we've received, that we're receiving drafts of this week. The first study that we received today is a space utilization study, which basically for the new building, if you're taking Wyndham Middle School, Jordan Small Middle School, and half of Manchester School, how much space do you need for a nurse's office? And so really starting to really nail down space, classrooms, number of classrooms, athletic facilities, those types of things. So middle level administrators and central office administrators and the architects will be meeting next Wednesday afternoon to go over that. In addition, we have, and I know you've all heard me talk about this, but we've asked for, and the state's paying for, a complete facility use study. It goes back to in 2026, and we've talked about this with wanting to have universal pre-K in the district. The last thing that we want to have is to find out we can't actually do it because we don't have enough classroom space. And so part of that study is pre-Ks are maxed at 16. So how many pre-Ks can you actually fit into existing buildings once grade levels get shifted around? And so that preliminary report, I've been told we'll have, tomorrow's Thursday, right? So either tomorrow or Friday. And the elementary principals will be reviewing that mid-morning on Tuesday. And then construction will look at that Thursday night. But it feels like we're actually getting to building planning instead of talking about it.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure.
Just a quick question. On the pre-K, pre-K is half a day? It's full day? Okay. But we could do half a day, in a morning and an afternoon, why not? Huh? Well, I'm saying, could we look at, if there is an issue, could we look at, like the way kindergarten used to be, before we made all day, you had a morning and an afternoon session? I'm just saying, it's not,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not for now.
and it's a great question
Couple of years
because
away. I want to get more kids in there.
what the board's going to get and what the construction committee is going to receive, I shouldn't say get, they're going to be receiving, is a menu of options based upon if we do this with this grade configuration, this is what it means for pre-K, and this is what it means for grade levels. If you do this, this is what it means, and if you do this, this is what it's going to mean long-term. Part of the discussion I had with Lance today was actually part of our conversation last night. We have more and more housing developments that are being planned. I would like to just make sure that, 5 years down the road, we're not looking at wings and other things that we need to do. If there's a possibility of having some state support to do some building, let's do it now.
In March, just adding half-day pre-K wouldn't necessarily get more students in because most parents need that full day of support for their kid. They can't find other sort of childcare opportunities. So there are some districts, I know Cumberland was one, they only offered half-day pre-K and they couldn't even fill their spots because of
Childcare
that.
after
So
the other half
it
of the day.
usually has to do with the hardships around trying to get a child there at 8:30 in the morning and pick them up at noon when you work a full-time job.
I guess years ago it worked for kindergarten, but it isn't going to work anymore.
But thank you for your comment. Curriculum.
So Christine Hessler, Christine Frost-Burtonay, and I met this week to outline the rest of the year. Basically, they did it. I just said, okay. Our next meeting is Tuesday, April 12th at 5 in the superintendent's office and via Zoom for those that can't. We are updating the curriculum review cycle of content areas and have an update on handwriting. And the agenda is being worked on and will be sent to everybody shortly. But I just wanted to take a minute to remind everybody what the purpose of the committee is, because I feel like that's really important. The Curriculum Committee considers and makes recommendations concerning the district's board policies of education and research. This committee reviews major areas of curriculum development, regular special education services, pupil assessment, long-term program review, and program revisions. Committee members consider the board's priorities in curriculum areas. The committee reports its findings to the board and suggests programs and policy modifications that may be appropriate in curriculum and program areas. New program activities undertaken by the district, the implementation of new curricula, oh goodness, now I lost my place, or piloting of new programs are topics of particular interest. The committee reviews research on the curriculum and program changes and reports its recommendations to the board. The committee reviews proposals concerning student courses, ensure the board's familiarity with district educational programs, monitor achievements, and cause the evaluation of education programs. And we have our website that has all that lovely stuff on there, because she's really good at what she does.
Perfect.
That's it.
Thank you. Adult Ed, they haven't met? Nothing? Okay. Voc? Nothing?
Nothing till May.
Nothing till May. I'm going to keep asking every week, though, just. And policy is scheduled to meet on the 11th, I believe, a couple weeks. And that's it for committee reports. Let's see, it's 8:30. Oh, my goodness. Right on the nose. We're adjourning at 8:30. May I have a motion, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Kate Bricks,
Yes.
Jessica Bridges,
Yes.
Jenny Butler,
Yes.
Mark Cavoni,
Yes.
Pete Hensler. Yes. Char Jewell,
Yes.
Kate Levier,
Yes.
Scott McLean. Yes. Mike McClellan.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. See you next week. Good night.
Hey, Scott. I think we can catch up.